Thanks for joining us here at noon. I'm Tatum Miller. Newly filed court documents detail what police found when they were called to a deadly shooting in Fargo last Monday. Fargo police were called to the parking lot of 2226 6th Avenue for reports that a man had been shot in the face. When police arrived, they found the victim, Zion Brooks, laying on the ground with a gunshot wound to the left side of his face. Zion was taken to the hospital where he later was pronounced dead. Documents also state a firearm was located under Zion, as well as a spent bullet casing. According to documents, Zion's girlfriend believed Amir Logan was the person who shot Zion. She said Amir was the only person who had beef with him. Officers spoke with two witnesses who said they saw Zion walking towards Amir with a gun. Neither witness saw Zion get shot, but they said they heard a gunshot. A video of the shooting was provided to police that showed a silver SUV that belonged to Amir leave the lot right after the gun was shot. Formal murder charges have not yet been filed against Amir, but he was charged with 2 counts of unlawful possession of a firearm yesterday. He's scheduled to appear in court later today.